Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Stories That Inspire Us podcast. My name is Janice, your host, and of course, I have an amazing guest on today, and I'm going to try to restructure myself on my chair here. There's some kind of issue. Well, let's just be real here. I'm the one that's having issues today with dates, and my chair is all, pushing me forward. But in any event, today's guest is really amazing. And before I do her formal introduction, I have a question for everyone out there. And I really want you to think about this as we chat about her story. But do you have a fire burning in your soul? Would you like to make the world a better place? And without further ado, I want to welcome the amazing Emily Cleghorn. Welcome to the Stories podcast. I'm so excited to have this chance to speak with you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, you're so welcome. And excuse me, as I mentioned, I wanted to ask those questions because I have to tell you, when I read your bio, when you filled out the registration, and I've had so many amazing guests on, and it really touched me in a very heartfelt way to make the world a better place. And why don't you tell us, let's begin with the story behind the story, which leads you to where you are today.
How far back do you want me to go?
Well, perhaps maybe a year or so before this journey started, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing, because your story really touched my heart, and I know that it will touch many.
All right. So growing up, I was raised by my paternal grandparents. My biological parents weren't really in the picture. They were, but they weren't. They were in the picture when it was convenient for them. Around the time that I was 6 years old, my dad got married. And at that point in my life, I had a really close relationship with my dad. So I, being a 6-year-old little girl, wanted to go and live with my dad and his new wife and my stepbrother. And my intention was to just be close to my daddy. Mm-hmm. Little did I know that the 18 months that I was going to be living with him were going to be filled with some of the most horrendous heartache that I have ever experienced in my life. During those 18 months, I was abused, not by my father, but by my stepmom and my stepbrother, physically, emotionally, and sexually. And that set me up for a whole other level. So I had the parental abandonment issues from being a baby without my mom, and my dad kind of in and out, and then the physical, emotional, and sexual trauma that ensued when I was 6 years old. So to leave that situation taught me that I had to advocate for myself. And so one day I was visiting my mom. I went to visit on weekends because I wasn't allowed to stay at home. I went to visit my mom, and she told me, come Sunday night, she told me to go pack up my things and she would take me home. And something clicked inside my little mind, and I decided I was not going back there. Didn't matter what I had to do, I was not going back there. So I packed up my bag, and I hid under my sister's desk, and I put my backpack in front of me so that nobody could see me. And my half brother and half sister would come in the room, look for me, not know where I was, say my name. I didn't answer because I didn't want to go home. and they never thought anything of it. It felt like forever. Eventually my mom came in and she did find me, and she asked me why I was hiding. I said, I don't want to go home. And so she got on the phone, and I ended up moving back in with my grandparents that night. I stayed with my grandparents pretty much until I went off to university, because that's what I was told I had to do. So all through my teen years, I started dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression. I felt like I was a waste of space. I felt like I was just, there was no real purpose for me. I was the human punching bag, if you will. And so I was just, but I was determined to not be a statistic. From a very young age, I decided that I was not going to be a statistic on some data sheet somewhere that said X number of children who grow up with absent parents do this, or, whatever. So I had a fire inside of me. There were times when I did think about giving up, but there was always something that kept me going. So fast forward about 9 years ago, I decided to move to Western Canada. I grew up on the East Coast, and that was the furthest I've ever been from home. And when I moved, it was like a big sigh of relief, because I was physically in a new space with new people who had no idea what I had gone through. So I could distance myself, and life was okay. I got a teaching job. I spent 6 years teaching elementary school. And then when I moved out there, I met who's now my husband. I moved to Western Canada to find a cowboy and found a New Brunswick farmer. Just how life works, I guess. And so we got married in 2016. And at that point, I was not sold on the idea of having children, but he wanted children. So in my mind, I thought that I had to give him children so that he would love me and stay with me. So I agreed to have our daughter, but that road was not an easy road, because my stress response was on high alert for so long. At this point, it was nearly 30 years where my stress response was on high. My body was run by my stress response. That's the only way I knew how to live. And so I had trouble establishing pregnancy. I went to the doctor, and we did some fertility treatments to help my body along. I ended up miscarrying with that, and that's another story for another day. So that set me on my healing journey, healing from trauma. And through really diving into the world of health alternatives and healing my body, I got pregnant, and all of the repressed trauma that I was able to move away from and have a little bit of separation from when my daughter was born came rushing back like a freight train, and I had to deal with it. So that's how I got to where I'm at.
Wow, you covered, and by the way, thank you for sharing your very raw and vulnerable story. And I know that you do this because you want to shed light on this stigma. No child, and I want to be very clear about this, no person, no child should have ever gone through something as dramatic as you did ever. And I want to be very clear about that. And again, I appreciate your honesty and candor. I want to go back to a moment with the scenario where you moved back. You were with your dad and stepmom, and you moved back with your paternal grandparents. Were your maternal grandparents around, or did they know what was happening with any of this?
My maternal grandparents have always kind of been the grandparents that you go see on Christmas, and they send you a birthday card, but they're not like, they've never really been like prominent, visible,
Sure.
constantly in my life. So they've always been kind of in the background. They support me, they love me, but they're more distant.
Gotcha. So therefore, obviously being with your paternal grandparents,
Mhm.
and obviously I assume that you had this amazing relationship with them. Did they know at any point what you, I mean, I would assume that when you moved back in with them that they found out, but did they have any indication that any of that was going on?
They knew something was going on because I was really, really, really unhealthily skinny.
Mhm.
I was During the time I was living with my dad, I was only allowed to eat what my stepmom put on my plate. I wasn't allowed to have seconds. I wasn't like, if I didn't like my supper, then too bad, so sad for you. You have to eat it or go without. Um, yeah, I got really, really skinny. I have school pictures from back then, and I I can't look at them because I look so unhealthy.
And when you look back at those pictures and you see yourself in those pictures, are you triggered by that picture? Because I can only imagine.
Yeah, I see when I do look back at those pictures, I can't look at them very often because it sends me right back. Um, but when I look at those pictures and I look in my eyes, I see brokenness because I know exactly what that little girl was going through at that particular time. I see the brokenness in her eyes. I see the wishful thinking that some adult, any adult, would speak up and do something
Mhm.
because my voice was stolen and I didn't have the tools or know how to advocate for myself.
Right. And that is so true and very poignant what you just said right there. Your voice was stolen along with other things.
Mhm.
But in that moment, when you're saying that, as a mom, as a parent, just as a human being, I feel that trauma. Like I am moved by that trauma, that it makes me kind of angry that you had to go through that. When was it, in your opinion, as you're growing up and now you're back with your excuse me, you're back with your paternal grandparents, did you ever voice to them like detailed information? And if so, were they on board as far as getting you some help? Was there any type of counseling or that type of thing?
Over the time that I was During the time that I was living with my dad and my stepmom, I went to see a child psychologist. And we talked about a whole host of things. They did some educational testing because I had trouble learning how to read. They thought I was dyslexic. Looking back, I could see there's more going on. I'm not dyslexic, but there's a whole bunch of reasons why a child struggles to learn how to read. Home life is one of them. But growing up, I had gone to several different counselors and therapists, and from everywhere from the school therapist in my high school to therapists in my university or counselors in my university, ones that I paid for, and all the talking in the world didn't do anything. The tools that they tried to give didn't serve me in my case. And I've had mental health professionals look at me and just tell me to let it go. They looked at me and said, Emily, it's time to let it go. And in that moment, I just sat there dumbfounded. Are you serious? Are you seriously telling me that I have to let it go? I'm trying to work through my emotions and come to some kind of understanding as to why this happened. And you're telling me that I need to let it go. You're invalidating my feelings, my experience, because you're tired of hearing it.
I was thinking the exact same thing. It's almost as if you had to go through the whole experience again, yet again, all the trauma, just for them to tell you that there's no, that's an invalidation. There was no validation there. I would think a professional in that realm, and again, I want to be very clear, I am not by any means not a professional in this, in mental health or this type of therapy. I have been through therapy many years ago, so I have some, knowledge as far as that go, but the trauma will always be there. And it's the professionals that need to help and guide us for different solutions to help us cope and go through those emotions, because there has to be that validation process. Of course, we want to move by it. Like, duh, did I have to come here and, you tell me that? Like, that just infuriates me. So I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. But part of the transitioning, or part of the process of the healing aspect of it, is to understand why. It's almost as if, somebody is, okay, I broke my foot. Okay, well, how did you break your foot? And I mean, that's a physical aspect of it, but the emotional and the mental health side of it, I think different people give those responses because they can't see it. They can't validate that in their minds because they don't see your foot wrapped up. They don't see a cast on your foot.
It's so much easier to minimize emotional or mental struggle because it's invisible. It's not always visible. You can't always see the struggle that someone's going through internally, because if they've been in an environment where their feelings or their emotions are not welcome or are shut down, then they learn very quickly, like I did, that you just stuff them. You become an emotion stuffer, and you stuff it down and you stuff it down and you stuff it down until one day it manifests as something else.
Wow. Did your dad ever know the
Yeah, he knew. He was also being abused, so there was nothing he could do. He was not courageous enough to leave.
Oh my goodness. And as you said that, and I just want a sidebar for just a moment. I just saw a whole bunch of stars and everything coming up from the Wisdom audio app. And I want to recognize all you amazing listeners here, because you are what makes this possible. We obviously are chatting about a very sensitive subject, and thank you so much for acknowledging Emily's journey. Emily, where you are in your life today, for instance, when you met your husband, when you started dating, how did you approach that subject of what you had been through?
He did not know that I was abused to the level that I was abused until our relationship became more intimate.
Gotcha.
He didn't have any idea of the gravity of the situation. And quite honestly, I think we've been together just over 9 years, the total of our relationship, and he's still learning. He's still learning little bits and pieces. He knows the bigger picture.
Right.
But it took a long time for me to let him in. When we first met, I pushed him away a little bit. I was like, okay, no, let's just be friends. First, I was like, no, not at all. Nope, get away from me. And then I was like, okay, well, let's be friends. And then he was really confused because I wanted to see him all the time, and how a relationship unfolds. And he's like, well, what are we?
Yeah, they tend to do that to us, but that, we'll talk about that at another time. Because I hear somebody upstairs pounding the feet, but those are my issues right now. Hopefully nobody else heard it, but hey, this is what live podcasting is all about, as I always say. Your journey has brought you to a place where, as I kind of opened up with, that you have a fire burning in your soul, and you want to make the world a better place. How are you doing that?
So I knew in 1996, when I was going to the child psychologist, maybe it was 97, I don't know, 96, 97, somewhere in there, million years ago, that I wanted to help kids like me, because no kid deserves to bear the brunt of that kind of trauma. No kid deserves to be born and discarded and treated as if they don't matter. And I didn't know exactly what that would look like until very recently. So I am a dual certified health and life coach. I go by the title of life reclamation coach. And my focus is on helping trauma surviving women who are navigating mamahood after a traumatic childhood. And so I help them to awaken to and align with their whole authentic self, the self that they were created to be, divinely created to be, versus the self that they were told to be in their trauma. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Wow. Now, you said dual certified, a certified life coach and
A certified health coach.
certified health coach. Okay. I want to make sure I got that down correctly. Because I know that when people go through different traumas, obviously I often refer to the trauma with my son's life-threatening accident last year.
Mhm.
It really does wreak havoc on everything going on. The nutrition aspect, the self-care aspect, the just, being in the moment with other people without having to worry about, getting a call. And I would imagine that, these women, first and foremost, I'm very glad that they have someone that they can trust with their overall care and go through that, the life coaching aspect of it, because a lot of times we don't think of the nutritional side and the self-care side, while navigating, as you said, being a motherhood, being a mom, and the trauma coming back, because unfortunately it often does.
Yeah. Our society doesn't talk about how triggering motherhood is. In my own experience, support for postpartum moms is almost zero. Support for postpartum moms dealing with a traumatic past is even less. So, the education around how triggering motherhood is desperately needed, because we have millions of mamas who have beautiful babies and hate being a mom, but they love their children. And there's so much shame around admitting that I hate being a mom. And it has nothing to do with their kids. It has everything to do with the trauma that our society tells us to push down. Don't talk about the hard stuff because it's uncomfortable, or you'll hurt somebody else's feelings, or whatever
Right.
excuse that they want to use.
And honestly, I think it is an excuse, because why should that amazing young mama have to still deal with it? And unfortunately, it does come up over and over again. Yet to have society put them in a box, like, okay, just, stuff it down. You're a new mom now. You got to do this, 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 and this. Yes, we know that, but we can't control our emotions or we need the tools, I should say, to control our emotions, to help us work through it, to help us navigate through it, because those traumas will continue to come up.
Yeah, it's hard to teach a child how to regulate their own emotions if you don't know how to do it yourself.
Exactly.
So, and that's part of the puzzle.
How long have you been a dual certified life coach and certified health coach?
I've been doing this work now for about 2 years. And I've got some very exciting things up my sleeve.
Oh, would you like to share any of the exciting things?
Um,
You don't have to.
I am in the process of writing a book,
Yes.
and it you can I'm giving people the opportunity to follow along with the book writing process. So I'm posting a couple of times a week on my Mended Mama blog. And those are excerpts from the book. And eventually, when I get to the point, the subscribers on there will have the opportunity to help me choose the title of my book. And I'm also working on it's called the Mended Mama Academy. And that is part of my signature coaching program, which will be launching in the beginning of February of 2023. So lots of exciting things happening.
Wow, Emily, congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I love how you said it's almost like you're taking your subscribers on that journey with you as your writing process. As you're writing, or as you have been writing the book, have you gotten to a point where maybe whatever section it is, you're like, nope, can't, no, I don't want to do this today, and you just put it aside? And when you come back to it, because a lot of times when writers are writing, I know for myself, if I'm writing about something that is very sensitive, if I push it away, I hopefully will come back to it in a new light with like a new kind of, okay, here's the problem, but here's the solution.
Yeah. I am working on peeling back a few layers of the onion. I go one layer at a time, very slow, so that the part of your brain that is like sounds alarms when there's change coming doesn't get tipped off and completely kiboshes the whole thing. So it's one step at a time, and I'm very gracious with myself, and I have a sticky note right here beside my computer that says feel the feels and keep going.
I love that. Feel the feels.
Feel the feels and keep going.
And keep going. Is that an Emily Cleghorn?
That's a Emily Cleghorn original.
And keep going. Okay, you heard that here. That's Emily Cleghorn. She's got a trademark on that, or she will. So I love that, because when you said that, I felt the energy of that. Feel the feels. You're acknowledging, you're validating, but you're keeping going
Keep
with
going. You don't sit down and have a cup of tea with your sadness or your grief. You feel it, you acknowledge it, and you work through it. You keep going. Because triumph is on the other side. If you sit down and have a cup of tea in the swamp of all of that ickiness, you're not going to get to the beautiful garden that's on the other side of the swamp.
That is so true. And it brought me back to a time where before I had gotten divorced, and I would drown my sorrows and how I felt in Ben and Jerry's and potato chips, but it wasn't. And every time I walk by a bag of potato chips, I am triggered. But now I'm learning how to deal with that. It may sound a little weird to people, but I am triggered because, as you had mentioned, I went back to that person that I felt. I went back to that trauma, that sadness that I was feeling. Wow. I am so excited about your upcoming projects. Now, you mentioned your blog, Mended Mama blog.
Mhm.
How else can people, our viewers and listeners, get in contact with you?
So if you go, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook.
Okay.
On Instagram, I'm at emily.cleghorn.coach. And from there, there's a link in my bio that will link you to the blog, to all the projects. Lots going on. So, yeah.
Emily, I think you are more than just the Mended Mama. You're the Mended Mama coach, life coach, and health coach that guides these amazing women, these new mamas probably going through a difficult time. And I'm so glad that they have you to
Thanks.
guide them through that. Wow. I am going to do our close off on wisdom, and then we'll do our formal close off on Facebook here on the Stories That Inspire Us Facebook page. I want to thank all of my amazing listeners. Again, from Wisdom, I see many familiar names. So thank you so much for being here. I love Wisdom, and the fact, Emily, that you shared your very in-depth wisdom and your real authentic story. And I'm just inspired by you as an individual and so excited to see where this next part of the journey takes you. Bye for now, Wisdom. And remember, if you have a story to share, it's that important. You need to share it because somebody needs to hear your story. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again real soon. Okay, Stories That Inspire Us Facebook page, all my amazing viewers and listeners. This has been such an amazing podcast. And Emily, I hope that you will certainly, agree to come back and, maybe once you've got your academy up and running, we would, of course, love to help you promote that as well. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for honoring your journey and honoring your client's journey. Wow. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us today. Wow. I am truly indebted to this amazing young woman who wants to make the world a better place. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.
Bye for now, everyone.